There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon. This is episode number 181, and today we are joined by Will Primos, and we're discussing the whitetail rut, calling strategies for deer, hunting the South, and a whole lot more. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Sitka Gear. And today, we are in for a treat. Not, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of like stupid, cheesy Halloween jokes. But I'm not going to make a Halloween joke. We are in for a treat today because we are joined by the one and only Will Primos. And Will really doesn't need any introduction at all, but I'll give a very brief one anyways. Will is the founder of Primos Game Calls. He's the host of Primos Truth About Hunting TV show, and he's one of the leading voices in the deer hunting community. And today, I actually recorded this interview with Will a couple days ago, and in that conversation, we talked about the whitetail rut. We talked about calling strategies for deer. We talked about hunting whitetails in the South. We talked about using terrain features, the future of deer hunting, all sorts of interesting things like that. And I got to tell you, since I do know how it all went, I can say that I think this one's really good. Will is just somebody that at least I could listen to talk or tell stories for just hours. He's a really enjoyable person to spend some time with. So I think you're really going to enjoy this one. But before we get to our conversation with Will, we need to take our weekly intro BS session pregame show extravaganza. We need to take a few minutes to do that, especially because at this time of year, what that usually means is that we get to talk about how our hunts have been going, and that's the game plan for tonight, right, Dan?
That's right. I want to apologize for not being able to make it to the Will Primos interview, but I was balls deep in diapers.
That sounds like a horrible visualization.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was. We had to do a funky timing for this one to record it, and you are super busy these days with the 17 kids you have, right?
Yeah, it feels like 17 kids. It also feels like I run a prison some days.
What are you doing with these kids?
Well, they're the wardens. They tell me what to do, basically, and I'm the inmate.
I see. I have a lot to learn, I guess.
Oh man. I asked my uncle one day. I said, "Hey man, what's the trick to raising kids?" And he said, "Oh, you just got to ignore them." And I start thinking about that. The longer I have kids, the more I realize that is a serious thing. At times you have to just ignore them.
Yeah, I could see that. There's some truth to that because shoot, look at our generation, the millennials. We got so much attention all the time for everything, and now everyone's so,
over you.
Yeah. Everybody's what's the word I'm looking for? And so much entitlement. Everything should be about me. That might be because we didn't get ignored enough. So we need to right that wrong for the next gen. I don't know how I can speak about any of this since I have no experience at all, but this is what I'm thinking about. I'm 3 months away from being a parent. So
I tell you what, you're like that person who, when I talk at my job to somebody about my kids, they're like, yeah, my kids are crazy too. I'm like, I didn't know you had kids. Yeah, my dogs. Yeah, my dogs are, they're crazy. Yeah, I think of my dogs as my kids. And I go, man, shut up.
Yeah.
Because I wish I could put my dogs in the base or my kids in the basement, lock them there for a day. I can't do that.
I just want to say that we do not condone the placing of children in the basement. This is not a recommendation by Dan. Or is it?
Well, I said I wish I could. I can't. You can't. When your son goes to the bathroom on the carpet, you can't hit him with a rolled up newspaper.
That's true.
I wish I could, but I can't.
Oh man, we better move on to something we're better at, because we are not good at parenting advice.
No.
Although I don't know if we ever said this on the podcast, but we got a review of the podcast on iTunes, and somebody actually said that they feel that they're a better parent today because of Dan's advice. So that's pretty profound, dude. You've had an impact.
Look for the book 2018.
Okay, deer.
Yeah.
Have you been deer hunting at all since we talked last week?
Yes. I went out. I got out Sunday morning and Sunday evening.
How'd it go?
Dude, I tell you what. Sunday morning had a really good 3-year-old come through, 8-pointer. Wouldn't score. He wasn't going to score anything major, but head on, he looked awesome. Like, he's that buck that if he snuck up on you, you may shoot him because you look right at his rack. He was about 2 to 3 inches outside of his ears on each side. Not very tall tines, but he had good brows, really good mass. But so he came out of the CRP, so I saw him for a long time. And then when he ended up getting close enough for me, what I guess you can say considered a pass, I could tell that his body was definitely not mature, and that right there just was like, nope. So I just sat down and watched him chase a group full of does, and he was kind of bouncing all over the place. And we always talk about seeing cool things in the tree stand. Mm-hmm. Really quick, I want to share this really cool thing I noticed. Okay, so this doe he was chasing had a fawn, and it wasn't like running real hard, but he was just kind of trotting after her, grunting, and she'd run off a little ways, put her head down, run off a little ways. Well, one time he let out a kind of a louder grunt, and this fawn like mock charged this 3-year-old buck, and like to say, "Get away from my mom," like something like that. It was really cool to see. And then he just it took him by surprise, so he kind of jumped a little bit, but then he kind of he put his head down, like just a little bit, and then that fawn took off running. So, yeah, the bluff got called.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd never seen anything like that before. And then Sunday night, I went down to one of my best, like my historically good stands. It's basically this bedding area, and if you remember, last year the farm got logged.
Wasn't that 2 years ago?
Yeah, it could have been 2 years ago. Maybe it was 2 years ago. Anyway, whenever it was. So now all these treetops are down. It's really thick. It's really nasty. And I'm telling you, the deer were packed in there. The does started coming out. I saw several young bucks kind of harassing these does. And then I heard some crashing kind of coming through the one part of this bedding area. And I saw antlers and I saw legs, and he went down into the creek. I put my binos on him. I couldn't really see what he was, but it looked like a buck I had trail camera pictures of, a good 4-year-old that would definitely be on the hit list. I couldn't 100% identify him, but I gave him a couple grunts. He kind of stopped and looked my way behind all the bushes, but then I heard him grunt and take off. And I didn't see the doe, but I'm assuming there was a doe that he was kind of going after. So,
wow.
the short of it, that was my weekend, dude. Check some trail cameras. I got some dandies that showed up, except they're like 10 o'clock at night.
Are these
So
new bucks?
one of them is the buck that I showed you, right? He's still on the same camera.
He's just stupid.
Yeah, and then another buck that matches his size, exact same 8-point frame, but no split G2.
Wow.
So he's a clean 8. And then the other trail cameras, man, I haven't checked yet, and I won't check them until I actually go hunt those stand locations in the next 2 weeks.
Cool. Well, not a bad day.
No, it was a good day. It was like that really crisp morning. The only issue I had was the weather. I don't know if you ever run into this, but the Weather Channel or wherever I get my weather from said we got a south wind. It's going to turn southwest mid-morning. And I got to my tree stand and my wind was almost straight east with a little bit of south in it.
Ugh.
And it wasn't where the deer were coming out. So I figured, hey, I'm just being aggressive, real overly aggressive with this wind. But typically these deer pile out on a southeast, southwest wind. So I let it ride, and luckily nothing came through. And when the deer that did come through were like some forkhorn bucks, and they just ignored. I mean, they couldn't smell me. They must have ignored. The ozonics must have been working. Whatever. So
Yeah.
that was my Sunday, man. And I'm looking forward to Friday and the next 2 weeks, man.
Hey, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be here before you know it.
That's right. Now, wait.
Rutcation.
Yeah, the Rutcation. Holyfield ?
Yeah. So that'll be the finale of my update. Let's start up just after we last talked.
Okay.
So last time we talked, I went in for Holyfield, went into my box blind, and it was infested with bees, so I had to hunt somewhere else. The next night, went to another stand in a good spot. The day's going really well. I've got 15 does out feeding around me with like an hour and 45 minutes of daylight still. I'm like, all right, this is it. Like, the deer are really moving. They're moving early. This is the kind of night that a mature buck would show. And then at like 5:30, like an hour and a half before daylight, while all these deer are all around me, all of a sudden I hear a chainsaw fire up on the neighboring property, and all the deer go running out. So that was the end of that night. Hunted the next night, didn't see much. So then after that, I got to thinking, I've hunted 3 or 4 days now on this property. It's not going right. It's not going well. Haven't seen really any really great daylight activity. Well, no daylight activity on trail camera as far as Holyfield, and haven't seen any rutting activity yet. So I thought, I'm going to give it a break. I'm going to go down to Ohio for a couple days. So I bombed down to Ohio, hunted for 2.5 days down there. I had 2 good sets of encounters. Sunday night, I think it was Sunday night, I saw 2 different 3-year-olds, probably in the 120 class. Passed on one of them. The other one was across the valley from me, but it was cool seeing them cruising. And then I made a mistake.
All right.
I did something that I always talk about not doing. What I did here is I did not practice what I preach. And I had a reason to do this, but it just proved to be poorly timed. So here's the scenario. I had been sitting this tree stand, and midday I had a trail camera about 70 yards away I wanted to check. So I go check that trail camera, check the pictures. It shows one of our big mature shooter bucks had been at that camera in daylight 2 nights before, and then 5 nights before that, at 6:45 p.m. both times, right around there, give or take a couple minutes. So
consistent wind on both encounters?
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty close to the same wind that we had that night. So I'm thinking, well, there's a decent chance he might be coming through here again tonight in daylight. The issue was I couldn't see. Even though it was only 70 yards away, there was a little bit of thick cover in the way. So I couldn't really see that. So if that buck came through there, I wouldn't really know unless he continued in my direction. So I had this idea. I was like, you know what? When 6:45 comes around, I'm going to try a little calling sequence. Just because, not much has been going on. Can't hurt. Give it a shot. I'm down in Ohio. I'll be a little aggressive. And so the night progresses, and as 6:45 rolls around, I decide, all right, I'm going to do my calling sequence. Now, the thing I usually preach is I don't like to blind call. Personally, I typically do not call to deer unless I can actually see them.
Yep.
Because, there's a number of different risks. Now, I know some people blind call, and it works for them. It's just maybe I'm overly cautious and conservative. But I worry about spooking deer I don't see. I worry about maybe getting a deer's attention that I don't know is around, and then him coming in from a direction I don't, I'm not aware of, and then him catching me moving or something, et cetera, et cetera. So 6:45 rolls around. It's kind of windy, so I have to be kind of loud and aggressive with my grunt. So I do like a loud grunt, and then I'm like, why not try a snort wheeze? So then I hammer out a snort wheeze, and I hear kaboom, ba-boom, ba-boom, and I spin around, and I see a white tail about 40 yards away, bounding away from me, and I pull up my binoculars, and I see a great big rack on top of this buck's head.
Really?
So there was this buck that was at least 40 yards, if not closer, coming towards me. My assumption would be, since I hadn't seen him before. Now I'd been like looking around me and stuff, but
you did the pre-rattle scan, didn't you?
I'm sure I did a scan, but I obviously didn't do a good enough scan. Even though like where he ran into and where I'm assuming he was coming from, it's kind of thick. And it was low light, it was only 15 minutes of daylight left. It was kind of windy, so everything's moving. So I did a quick look around, didn't see anything. But I obviously did not look well enough because he was very close and closing the distance. And then I go and make a loud grunt and a snort wheeze when he's maybe 35 or 40 yards away. And then he bounded off.
Ugh.
Now, I don't know how big he was, because all I could see was a couple seconds of him going through this brush, heading away. And I'm looking at him from behind, and deer always look bigger than they actually are when you see them from behind. But he looked, I don't know, and he could have been maybe from 120s to 140s. I don't know, somewhere in that ballpark, but not a buck that you want to spook. It would be the moral of that story. But he didn't seem to be too spooked because he made a couple bounds, and then he stopped. I saw him stop, and then he kind of just walked off. But
so do you think it was just taken by surprise, or do you think he caught your wind?
I think he just got taken by surprise. He did not catch my wind.
Okay. Did he see you rattle?
I didn't rattle. I just grunted.
Okay.
I don't know, but I don't think I wasn't making any dramatic moves. It was pretty subtle movement, and I was facing the opposite direction from him. So I think he just got startled by this really loud noise when he was right there, and wasn't feeling it.
Gotcha.
So that was that night. The next morning, hunted a different spot and had a nice 9-pointer come in. I think he could have been 4. It was kind of hard to see his full body with how tall the brush was. 3 or 4 definitely. Maybe like a 130 class 9-pointer with like a really cool, big, kind of curving, bladed brow tine.
Yeah.
But I decided to pass on him, but got a cool encounter. Got to watch him for a long time. And that was the hunt. I hunted that night, didn't see anything but a doe, and headed back to Michigan. Which takes us to last night, which is the question mark incident.
Right.
I may have had a Holyfield encounter.
Okay. How close was this encounter?
60 yards.
Okay.
But thick cover.
Are you 100% positive it was him?
I'm not 100% positive. I've gone down in confidence since the incident. Like every time I think about it, I'm like, maybe not. So like when it first happened, I'm like, I'm 95% sure that was him. And then by like the next morning, I'm like, well, maybe it was 90% sure it's him. And then tonight, I'm like, maybe 85% sure it's him.
So why don't you just describe the encounter?
Yeah. So here's what happened.
Describe what you saw.
Yep. So I'm hunting in one of my favorite sets. It's been there for a long time. It's been traditionally a good spot to be at this time of year. A little like 1/4 to 1/2 acre food plot, tucked in between. On one side's a really good bedding area, and the other side is a narrow strip of corn that comes down, and then another good bedding area just on the other side of that. And so I'm sitting there. It's like 4:30 or 4:45. It was pretty early in the evening. And 2 does had come into the food plot. And the way my wind was blowing, I was just cutting the corner of the food plot with my wind. So if the deer were in 95% of the food plot, they couldn't catch my wind. But if they happened to go in the one very far bottom corner of it, they would possibly be in my wind. Well, these 2 deer went there, of course. And so they're right downwind of me. And they're just standing there. Fortunately, with all my scent control stuff, everything I'm doing, they didn't wind me, but they knew something was up. So they're standing there and they're just their noses in the air. They're looking their nose, trying to figure out what's going on. So I'm looking at them, and then I'm like, oh, are they going to blow? Are they going to blow? Are they going to blow? And then I just happen to catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. So I turn my head, look to the left, and across the food plot, maybe 5 yards inside of the timber, and it's very thick across the food plot. Inside the timber, I see a big buck like walking right towards me, like he's gonna come into the food plot. I'm like, holy crap! And like I had like a second and a half where I'm looking at him, and like my mind said that's Holyfield, like the basic frame. I was like, that's him. There's no other. I mean, there's no other big bucks in the area but him. I'm like, that's him, and he's walking right in. He's like 5 yards away from the food plot, aimed right at me. So now I need to get my bow before he gets into the plot, and I can't move. So I spin slowly, grab the bow, and as I start to spin back, I'm looking at him again. But now instead of coming to the food plot, he's turned and he's parallel in the food plot. And I get like another 2 seconds of looking at him, and then he gets behind this thick cover, and literally that's it. So I had like a second and a half when I saw him coming in, turn to get the bow, and then by the time I turned back, I've got like 2 more seconds of a glimpse. And I remember the thing I was trying to figure out, the thing I was trying to confirm, is whether his main beams curved up or curved down. Because there is a 2.5-year-old buck that I've been calling Droopy that is like a mini-me of Holyfield in a lot of ways, like what Holyfield looked like 2 years ago, except for his beams angled down at the end instead of curving up.
Yeah.
So I've seen this buck in the past. I'm like, oh crap, is that Holyfield? Like for a split second, and then you're like, oh no, it's not. Smaller beams go down. But so in this instance, I was trying to see as he's going through the cover. That's what I remember looking at, and I feel like in my head I remember seeing curved up. So that's why I feel pretty confident it was him, but because it was such a brief encounter, I don't know. And so he gets behind this thick cover. And so my next thought is I need to grunt to him. I need to call him in. So I grab my grunt tube, and then I remember those 2 does. And I look over, and again, those 2 does are still standing at 25 or 30 yards or whatever with their noses in the air, still trying to figure things out. And I realize if I make a grunt right now, if I make some noise, that's going to spook these deer out of here. Like, they're going to freak because they're already kind of on edge. And then if they hear a loud noise from 20 yards away, I'm going to blow those does out. So I can't grunt. I can't make a call. So now I'm just hoping that they don't blow and that he is just coming in from a different angle and going to come into the plot. Well, he never did come into the plot, and I could never get eyes on him again. I thought he would walk across a clearing in the brush and I'd be able to see him again, but he never did. And I scoured and scoured it. And that was it. That was the encounter. I mean, like 3-4 seconds, and he just disappeared like the ghost he is. And that was it. And then I did see, now this is another thing that made me wonder. Like an hour and a half later, I did see Droopy. I saw his mini-me chasing does. Now, he came from a different direction. He came from the totally opposite side, but I did see Droopy later that night. And then this morning, I saw Droopy again, bumping around. He's all over the place. Yeah. Saw 6 bucks cruising around this morning, but no sign of Holyfield. But I do have news related to Holyfield still.
Okay.
This is new even from when we started this podcast recording.
Okay.
I have a picture on my cell camera that just came through of Holyfield in my food plot about 45 minutes ago.
So he's there right now.
He's there right now, dude.
Dude, that guy is going to tease the shit out of you, and he's going to prevent – oh, man. This, you know how I was obsessed with this buck called Shipwreck?
Oh, yeah.
And like you're kind of getting to that point now where you want to kill him so bad that you almost have blinders on.
Yes. I can't really like enjoy what's going on in Ohio or think about other things. It really has become an obsession. That is true.
Because, you're getting ready to potentially head out to North Dakota to hunt as well. And you don't even know if you're going to go now or not because like this entire season's revolving around one deer.
Yeah, and that's exactly the issue. Is like I've got this North Dakota tag. I want to use it, but like we talked about earlier today, unless I kill Holyfield, I can't leave. I need to be local. I need to be here to take advantage of something if something comes up. So yeah, it is all consuming. It's kind of it's quite an adventure. He's been frustrating this year. He has not shown himself in daylight yet. So hopefully soon.
That's going to change, man. That's going to change.
Hopefully soon. Yeah. So just crossing all my fingers and toes, trying to be smart about it, trying to be careful but aggressive when I should be. Tomorrow I've got a horrible wind for hunting this property, and I sat all tonight like trying to think, how can I hunt with this wind? And I ended up deciding I'm not going to hunt it at all. I'm going to go and run and gun some random public land rather than force the issue on a day that tomorrow it's going to be 60 degrees, it's going to be warm, and it's going to be storming all day. Like, I don't need to push it on a bad wind with those kind of conditions. I'm going to let the property take a day off, and then get back after them when this another little cold front comes through. I've got good winds then, and hopefully the cards will finally be in my favor. So
I'm pulling for you, bud.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate everyone. I got to say, it's been kind of cool. So much support from our audience, from all you guys listening and following along on social media and all the different things we're doing. So many people wishing me luck, sending words of support, talking about how they're following along. That's awesome. I appreciate that. It's keeping me going strong, keeping me on point, and hopefully I will be able to have good news here soon. But for anybody who's been listening and they don't care about us at all they've wanted to hear is about Will Primos. I apologize that our rambling has gone on for so long, but you now know a little bit about about my hunt for Holyfield and Dan's kids. So
Abracadabra.
Yep. So next week will be an exciting podcast because, Dan, you will be in the middle of your rutcation, and I will be hopefully doing some exciting things. So we'll have some good stories to share next week. So for now, I say let's stop our stories. Let's pause to thank our partners at Sitka Gear, and then let's get Will Primos on the line.
For this week's Sitka story, we're joined by Jem Caesar, who tells us why his 2017 archery season has been the most unique one yet.
This year for the Louisiana 2017 archery season, I decided to make a big change to my arsenal, and that change being traditional archery gear, along with wearing Sitka gear. This year's been rather different for me. I was in for a lot more treats whenever I made sits. I've literally, every time I've gone to the stand, not 5 minutes later, there's a herd of wild hogs that comes out every time, no matter the time of the day. I can go into the stand at like 12 o'clock, and I kid you not, by 12:05, there'll be pigs coming in. And I've managed to harvest 4 hogs so far using traditional gear. And it's just an amazing feeling being able to go out in the stand and almost knowing on public land that you're going to have opportunity at an animal. And it just makes it that much better. And it's just awesome. Public land, as many know, is very hard hunting. It can be very rewarding. And sometimes, it's just, you get the raw end of the deal and you just go out and nothing happens. But this year, I can honestly say it makes me look forward to what's to come.
On Jem's hunts, he's been wearing Sitka's Equinox system. If you'd like to create a Sitka story of your own, or to learn more about Sitka's technical hunting apparel, visit sitkagear.com.
All right, with us now on the line is Will Primos. Welcome to the show, Will.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be with y'all.
Oh, absolutely. This is one I've been looking forward to since we were able to line it up. And I got to ask you right out the gate, how is your hunting season going so far?
Well, we start early because we chase so many elk. We usually are gone for about a month to 6 weeks, depending. And this year we started out in early September and went back. Some of the guys went back for rifle season in early October. But so that starts the hunting season. It was a great elk season. We love the West. We love that world and get to meet a lot of different people out there, get to see new places to hunt whitetails and the drainages and so forth. So I like that aspect of it too. But we had a great season. And then deer season has gotten kicked off pretty good. I hunted week before last, and I did not get a shot. I had 2 deer that they were one of them was 225 yards away, and one of them was 427 yards away. I was hunting an old riverbed that used to be the Mississippi River until it switched courses. So it's a wide open area that has a slight slough going through it with very little trees growing in it. And it's a lot of just water vegetation and so forth where the river used to be. But anyway, we could see a long way from where we were, sitting in a willow tree back from it a little bit. One of the deer was 427 yards, and they were both fully mature. I couldn't decide if they were 4.5 or 5.5, but both of them were fine bucks. But of course, that was way too far from my bow. And cameraman said, "Why didn't you shoot at one of those deer?" I said, "Man, I didn't want to show off."
So are you hunting locally over the coming weeks, or are you traveling anywhere else to do some whitetail hunting elsewhere?
Mark, all these years I've traveled the Midwest and gone everywhere from Montana, Idaho, hunting whitetails, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Texas. And I'm 65 years old, and I'm real healthy and strong and exercise and good. But I've just gotten to where I don't like to travel, and I love the deep south whitetail hunting. I love what we call these just big old swamp donkeys that are so hard to figure out. You don't have the noticeable funnels and things like that you do in the Midwest. So we're sticking close. And we lease 11,000 acres on the Mississippi River. And it is in the corner of where Louisiana meets Arkansas. So North Louisiana and South Arkansas. And then the Mississippi River changed courses. So there's an island called Sarah Island. It's not an actual island unless the water's way up. And so we have land in all 3 states. We have all 3 licenses, and that's where we produce the Primos show primarily. There's every once in a while we'll go somewhere else in this area, but that is primarily where we do all of our whitetail hunting. So that's where we were hunting. And then last week they went back. I did not go last week. And Troy Ruiz, who's part of the team on our show, he killed 2 nice bucks, one with his bow and one with a crossbow. Matthews has a new crossbow that's pretty incredible, and he used it in Mississippi. So he got 2 nice bucks. Brad Ferris killed a doe. He's part of our team, been a part of our team for a long, long time. So they're headed back over there today, and they'll be here this week. And I'm taking a couple of days off, for one, to be with you and your guest on your show.
Well, we certainly appreciate that. And I want to talk about this topic of hunting in the Deep South and how different it is than the Midwest, like you mentioned. But I guess before that, I would be remiss if I didn't at least get you to tell us a little bit of your history, Will, because I'm sure most people today are familiar with who you are and what you've done with Primos and everything, but maybe they don't know how that all happened. Could you give us like the Cliff Notes version of how this all came to be?
Sure. Well, that's flattering you say that most everybody knows who I am or whatever. I don't know if that's the truth, but we have been doing this for 41 years. I started in 1976. I was born here in the Jackson, Mississippi area to a very extended, large family, grandfathers, grandparents, both sides, uncles, and they all hunted and hunting the Mississippi Delta in flooded timber for ducks. And I grew up on a small farm, and my family was in the restaurant business in Jackson. And this little small farm, we had a little lake, and I had all the small game you could chase a stick with, So that's how I grew up, and I loved it. And I loved fishing. I had a little Red Ryder wagon that I'd fill up with brim and bring them to the house and go to scaling them. I loved them fried whole. So anyway, that was kind of my life, and I just loved it. So I started making turkey calls early on, and people liked them a lot. They were different. And one thing led to another. I got out of college and went to work for the family, have a business degree. And I started this little company on the side. I called it Primos Yelpers. A Yelper, Y-E-L-P-E-R. A Yelper is a turkey mouth call. And so I started doing that and going to shows, and I'd sell out, and I'd go home and make more. And one thing led to another. And for long, I said, dadgummit, by that time I had 12 or 15 products, and things were going great. It was a timing deal. I couldn't do it. I don't think you could do it today. Packaging so much more sophisticated, in the digital world of doing business is so much more sophisticated. You really have to have some startup funds to get it going. But at any rate, things grew and grew, in 2006, Jimmy Primos, my cousin, had come in to help me run the place. He was the chief operating officer. We had 7 vice presidents that ran different departments within the company. At that time, we had about 160 employees, I think it was. But we sold to a private equity firm out of Chicago. I sold 95% of it. And then I stayed on as the head of it, and Jimmy was the chief operating officer, and all the executives stayed. And we grew it, doubled it, and sold it to Bushnell in 2012. And then in 2013, ATK, which was Applied Tech Systems, which is a publicly traded company that owned Federal Premium and CCI, as well as a lot of other outdoor brands, as well as they were in the business of putting rockets into orbit. They bought Bushnell. So we became a part of that family. And then ATK split, and they made a publicly traded separate outdoor sporting products division, and the rocket business, putting rockets into orbit and government contract side of things, went to a company called Orbital. So VISTA, Vista was born. We are part of the Vista brand of products now. Primos, actually the guy who came to Primos from South Carolina, Mike Powell, actually runs Primos on a day-to-day basis now. I'm still there anytime I want to be in, many days, every day. But so is Jimmy. But he actually runs Primos, Mike Powell does. And we also own and run Gold Tip arrows, Bee Stinger stabilizers, Final Approach decoys and waterfowl products, double bull blinds, Primos and Bushnell cameras are all under Mike's watch and our watch. So we're developing those products and putting new products out. We have a full new product development team and so forth. So that brings us kind of to today and where we are now. My main role is a public relations role, being in advertisements, being on camera, hunting, representing the company. Primos Truth About Hunting on the Outdoor Channel started in 1999, and it rates every month between 1 and 5. In the last 3 months, it's been number 1 on the Outdoor Channel as far as outdoor programming goes. Wow. So we're proud of that, but we're kind of amazed by it because we've been there so long, and it's easy to get stale. Mm-hmm. We got stale at one time and didn't do as well. That's kind of come around. But we love whitetail hunting. We do it, and we live and breathe it year-round. So maybe that's a little more than you wanted, but that kind of gets you up to speed to where we are.
No, it's an incredible story, and I can't imagine. Well, could you have imagined when you were first making those Primos Yelpers that so many years later you would be standing here today, working with all of these brands and in such a different place? It's an incredible journey, I have to imagine.
Yeah, it is an incredible journey, and you bring a huge smile to my face when you ask me that question, because I can remember those early days, and I can remember the struggles and the sacrifices. It's quite amazing to be where we are, but did I imagine it? I imagined having a strong, viable game call company, that for sure. And somebody said to me one time, don't ever underestimate passion. And somebody asked, it was talking about Charles Kuralt. I don't know how many of our listeners know who Charles Kuralt was, but he was on the road at CBS for years. And they asked the cameraman who's still living that worked with Charles Kuralt while he was on the road, they said, why did people try to call Charles Kuralt out of doing this? When he had the idea, why did they try to talk him out of it? Because that's a known thing that CBS didn't believe that this on the road show would work. And the guy said, well, I guess he knew something they didn't know. So, you know what you know, but for those of us who are passionate about a product or about a product line or an ideal, that's something to be reckoned with. And there's many great business principles. I have a major in business, and I love business, and I guess all that kind of came together to help us channel that passion into something that we truly loved, and to be able to have the energy to do it, to run a business and hunt. It takes a lot to hunt. We're serious about it, so it takes a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this idea of having that passion and how you can use that passion to be successful in business, that perfectly translates to the woods as well, because I think if you look at some of those core, common threads that run between, those people who maybe are the most consistently successful hunters, they all have that shared passion. No doubt about that, I think.
And I will say this about those consistent hunters that consistently killing mature big whitetails on a regular basis, year in, year out, and done it for years. There's many of them out there, and I love those guys. But there's one thing that they do that the average guy doesn't do, and that is that they respect the whitetail. Most everyday weekend hunters that want to be successful do not respect the whitetail enough. His nose and his ears are absolutely incredible, and you can't just be blasting up in the woods and expect one of these big guys to give himself up. It just ain't gonna happen.
Very true. So when you say respect the whitetail, it sounds like we're talking about just really respecting and understanding and accounting for just how wary and what survival experts mature bucks are, right? Is there anything more?
Well, you can get down to that. You can break it down into all aspects of entering the woods, being in the woods, leaving the woods. All that adds to not letting them know you're there, because you can't let them know you're there. And it kind of goes like this. You cannot hunt a whitetail where he is. Now, that one exception is that if he's bedded and you got the wind on him, you're able to see him or see his horns in a field or CRP field or whatever and stalk him and get within bow range and shoot him. And I'm talking about bow hunting here. But you can't typically hunt a whitetail where he is. You've got to hunt him where he's going to be. And you've got to get to where he's going to be without him ever knowing you're there or detecting you while he comes. So I hope that answers what you're trying to get at in respecting a whitetail.
Yeah.
They truly are. And I think it was, oh gosh, my mind just went blank. One of the guys, they had the early October whitetails video that back in the in the 80s.
The Wensels?
Yeah, the Wensels. I believe one of them said, I think it was Barry, that he said, when all's said and done, there's very few living creatures on Earth. The third to the last will be a whitetail. The second to the last will be a coyote, and the last will be a roach. And it just tells you how incredible those three animals are.
Yeah.
Because they're survivalists. And to understand a whitetail and what he needs and to make him happy, by being happy, what relaxes him, and that's cover, and that's being able to enter that cover and get and leave that cover undetected. Understanding his food sources, understanding how he goes about his daily activities. It's all an incredible puzzle.
Yes, and I think that's what draws us back to it year after year after year. Now, speaking of all of these things that make a whitetail such a survival expert, how does a southern whitetail differ than maybe the ones that you see on TV most of the time up in the Midwest, or like where I'm in Ohio right now, or wherever that might be?
Yeah. Well, years ago, Miles Keller came down here to hunt with a friend of mine, and he looked at this forest. He was hunting in the hills south of Vicksburg, Mississippi, which is not far from the Mississippi, but they're called Loess Hills, Loess, I believe is what you spell it. And that's wind-blown dust that made the hills south of Vicksburg. And he got there and he looked at this and he goes, oh my gosh, how do you ever kill a whitetail? Because it's tens of thousands of acres of woods. There's no funnels. There's no big grassland plateau tops and a bench that leads down a drainage that's the funnels. I've hunted that country, that Midwest country, and oh, how much fun it is to find one of those funnels.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You just have to. The biggest problem with those is you're going to see bucks. You're probably going to see some deer, And you've got to let the little ones go if you want to kill a big one.
Yeah, that's the
Because
trick.
when those 3.5 year, 145, 150 each deer come by, you're going, oh, that's the biggest deer I've ever had a chance to shoot at. I ain't passing that up. But if you will, lo and behold, booners might come by.
Mm-hmm.
So hunting in the South, you Brad Ferris, who's ran the Primos TV and video department for years and still is part of the show. He is incredible at being able to look at that kind of country and figure it out. We call them buck vines, but buck vines, vegetation, different stuff can be a funnel to a whitetail in this part of the country. And you're hunting food sources a lot this time of year. You got persimmons, you got honey locusts. These are some of the foods. And then we have native pecans. Native pecan is about 2 or 3 times as big as the small nail on your little finger. They're real little. They're full of oil. And they are the redwood, to me, they are the redwood of the Mississippi River as the redwood is to California. They are huge. When they get to be 80, 100 years old, they're as big around as a pickup truck and so tall and straight. They're just incredible. And they're unbelievable producers of mass. The number of pecans in those trees is crazy. So we had a big windstorm come by last week, and it just, on the river, but the dominant tree is the native pecan. And so there's just mass on the ground everywhere. And it really changes the pattern because they don't have to go very far to get food. The water sources, you've got the river they can feed in, you've got sloughs, so it's really hard to hunt water sources. So you got to find out where the thick areas are, and you make some of those, in time and while you're dealing with your property. But they're going to be in those thick areas. And we like to go in and provide a way to hunt them. Like we'll go in there and we'll make a thick area, like say a 3 to 5 acre, a cutover. And we keep it that way. We'll go in there and hack and squirt and poison to keep it. We don't want it growing back up in big trees. But for the dominant wind that we have, which is going to be a southerly or northerly in nature, but southerly when the southerly flows are coming out of the Gulf, and northerly, northwest when the winds are coming in from the north and the fronts came through like just happened. We're going to go in there and we're going to make a small food plot, usually in an hourglass shape, and we're going to grind the stumps, and we're going to make that food plot, and it's going to have a lot of cover next to it except for where we enter on the downwind side. And you got to enter from the downwind side. You can't come in from the other direction, or they're going to smell you. They may get up and leave, or they may just lay there. They know you're there. A whitetail can tell by smelling you how close you are, whether you're 20 yards away or whether you're 50 yards away or a quarter mile away. It's the intensity, and they're that good at it. So we build that to enable us to hunt a food source for early season. And then you typically know what we call ridges. Believe it or not, we've got ridges on the Mississippi River. Some of them may be 6 inches elevation in height. I remember the first time a guy from up there came up in your part of the country, came hunting with me at my farm, and I was saying, just walk until you see the ridge. And I wasn't thinking, I said, once you see the ridge, then walk down the ridge and you'll see the stand right there on the edge of the ridge. And so I came back. He said, I finally found the stand about an hour after it got daylight. I said, do what? And he goes, there was no ridge. So I walked him in there and showed him the ridge. He says, this is a ridge? It's a 6-inch elevation, and the deer will walk that. It may be 10 yards wide or 20 yards wide. It's how the Mississippi River and the Mississippi alluvial floodplains before the levees were built on the Mississippi River and all that came in and moved the water and built up sediment and caused these depressions, sloughs, or oxbow lakes off of other rivers or ridges. And you learn the finite details. And a southern hunter can more quickly find the nuances of the stuff in the Midwest, I think. Because when we go, we're looking at it with a different attitude. We're not looking for what the big blinking neon light. We're looking for those teeny tiny subtle sounds, subtle sights and terrain features that will guide a whitetail to what we call a tree. We would develop in Iowa. We leased land for quite a few years, and we had, I don't know, we had 3 or 4. We called them killing trees, and we never moved the sand. They were killing trees. I'm sure you've got some of those in your part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate a little bit on for the southern deer hunter, those nuanced little features or whatever it might be, whether it's terrain or cover or something else? Can you elaborate on some of those things that you've found do funnel deer or help you better choose understand where these deer might be moving?
Yeah. In general, deer are lazy when they're moving. They're relaxed and moving. And so to get down on their chest and go under something like a barbed wire fence, if they're entering a field or something, I mean, they'll do that. But if they're just walking through the woods, they're not typically going to do that. So you're looking for treetops, and you're looking for the wind may have come down and blown down several trees, and you start paying attention to how that forms, so to speak, a fence. Jack fences in the Midwest for us were a big guide for deer. A jack fence is fence that's put up typically because the ground's got too much rocks in it. You can't put a post in the ground. You don't want to use T-posts. That's even can be difficult. So they're leaning fences made out of saplings as big as your calf, say, or maybe a touch bigger, and they're forming a teepee look. And then you have cross members that keep cattle or livestock or whatever in a certain area, horses. And so these are great guidance to the whitetails. And we would look at those to kind of determine how the deer were traveling. Then, of course, you find their trails if they're using them a lot. But in the South, you're looking for treetops. You're looking for cane thickets. You're looking for buck vines. You're looking for stuff that's so thick that a deer can stay hidden until he gets to an open area. So you start walking the edge of that thick stuff. It could be Johnson grass. It could be goldenrod. Some of the stuff would be 6-8 feet tall. You cannot see the deer in there, and you can't see him until he gets to the open spot. So you go to the open spot and you walk it, looking for any trails where they may be repetitively using a trail to get to the mass trees or to an agricultural area or to a watering area. You just got to really pay attention and not look for the obvious, look for the things that aren't obvious.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned buck vines. What are buck vines? Maybe I'm just ignorant because I haven't been down in that part of the country.
Yeah. Buck vines may be as big as your wrist, and they will grow on these big, huge pecans and on sycamores and cottonwoods down in the South along the river and other places. And you get so many of them, they're like a tangle. And then they come loose from the tree, and you can imagine Tarzan swinging from tree to tree on them. That's kind of what they look like. But they can form a wall of sorts in the woods. And it might not be more than a 50-yard wall or a 20-yard wall. But they will hit that and go down it and then go to the next. And so you're looking for things like that help you determine the movement of a whitetail. And then hunting a place in the rut is another deal. Deer typically rut. And they'll show up in an area that typically you wouldn't see him, and all of a sudden, dang it, he showed up last November at this time, and here he is again. Where has he been? We don't have him on camera. Nobody's seen him. So I think they're just nocturnal as all get out and living in thick areas, and they move at night until it gets closer to the rut.
Yeah. Speaking of trail cameras and sometimes figuring out these bucks might be nocturnal and trying to figure them out. In the Midwest, when typically we're trying to pattern a buck or something, right? It's these kind of stereotypical usual ways that guys do it. They got a trail camera on a scrape on a field edge or on a food plot, and they just figure out, is he coming from this block of timber or that block of timber or whatever it might be. It seems like it must be a lot more difficult to try to pattern a mature buck in your neck of the woods, given the diversity in terrain and cover, the extent of cover. are you using kind of similar tactics with trail cameras and basically, patterning them off of those types of things, or is there something different you guys are doing?
Yes, you can. Now, summer salt licks have been a real plus for us. They use them so regularly, and then you get these pictures of these velvet bucks. One deer in particular I'm thinking about, we named him Eric after a friend of mine who was actually publisher of Outdoor Life and Field and Stream at the time. He was the first person to ever see Eric on the hoof. We had pictures of him, but we'd never seen him on the hoof. And he was a 3.5-year-old, but he was a 160-inch 3.5-year-old. Wow. And this is a really, that's an estimate. I don't know how big he was. He might have been 155, but he was 160 class deer. And he was just a great 8-point. So he was on my farm. I've sold my farm, but my farm was fairly large, and he moved a mile away. And we didn't know it. We were hunting another spot, and he came out of a planted CRP field, which was very, very thick. We had taken a cotton field and put it back into CRP. And he walked out about 100 yards away down the lane we were looking down. We were bow hunting. And he walked out, and we had a doe that had already come out from where he was, and he was fixing to walk right in front of us. And when he stepped out, we went, oh, my gosh, I'm going to have to make a decision to kill him or not, because he's 3.5. And he turned and went the other way. And so then we got to thinking, my gosh, he's a mile from where he was. We wondered what happened to him. So we started putting up trail cameras, and we got pictures of him. We decided to pass on him. The next summer, we put on a salt lick that was outside the CRP field, but not more than about 50 yards in the big woods. We put a trail camera on that salt lick and started getting pictures of him there regularly. And I'm estimating he's 175 to 85 inch deer this year. Wow. in velvet. I mean, he's a 9-point. He's got a split brow, and he's just massive. Matter of fact, you can see that hunt. It's on YouTube somewhere. You go to Mississippi, Will Primos, Primos, Will Primos, Mississippi Big Buck. Why we titled it that, I don't know why. But get more views. But anyway, you can actually see the actual hunt because it's on video. So we figured he was living in the CRP field, and we had to have a wind that had some north and some east, a slight bit of east in it to be able to hunt him, if I remember correctly. It's been a while. At any rate, we got on the edge of that field, and we got about 100 yards from the salt lick. And he was coming through there, moving from wasn't going to the salt lick anymore, but we had pictures of him on the edge of that CRP field coming out of it, moving through right at dusk. And he showed up, and he was, out in front of us, and I couldn't believe it. And then he turned around like he smelled something or he thought of something. And he turned around. I'm sorry, the wind was northwest. That'd be northwest, I remember now. And he turned around and headed in a southwest direction, and I was just like deflated. And there's an opportunity. We hadn't talked about it yet, but Colin. Yeah. So the cameraman, Johnny St. Clair's, guy who ran the farm for me, great guy. He's running the camera. I'm hunting, and he could still see his horns, and he's higher than me because he's in a stand higher than me, and I couldn't see him. He could still see the tops of his horns. He says, "Call to him, call to him." And so I got out my can and bleated. And he said, he stopped, grunt at him. So I grunted at him, and he said, he's not moving. So I wheezed at him, and it wasn't very long at all. I thought he was gone. He wasn't coming. All of a sudden, he's in front of us, and I was able to kill him.
Wow.
And if it wasn't for the cameras, and we actually had like 8 cameras surrounding where we thought he was living, but we wouldn't go into that CRP field, of course. But that's a good example of you cannot go into what people call their core area. You got to let him be there, let him be happy. Don't go to that area if the wind's at your back. Never let him know you're even looking for him, and put out those cameras, and then use that surveillance to kind of tell you where to place your stand. Of course, what makes it so cool is every one of these things is different. Every whitetail is different. Every hunt is different. Every scenario is different. Every terrain, landscape, the habitat, the thickness of it, the openness of it, all of that's different. And so you have to take all that information and start trying to put your puzzle together. But the big thing is to respect them. Do not let him know you exist. You do that, and you're changing the game.
All right, let's take a quick break here for a word from our partners at Whitetail Properties.
This week with Whitetail Properties, we are joined by Jason Ziegler, a land specialist out of Minnesota. And Jason is going to be talking to us about how to hunt an active farm during the rut.
Well, one of the biggest things is timing. You know, a lot of times the farmers are in the fields harvesting the corn at either the peak of the pre-rut or right at the beginning of the rut, and that can really trigger deer movement inside of the timber. You got to figure a lot of the deer that are living on these farms or in the ag fields, specifically standing corn, that's great cover for them. And the farmers out there taking them off, you want to be in the woods to catch some of that rutting activity. You're driving all of the deer now into a specific area versus a vast flat land of corn. So that's one of the things that I trigger on is get inside the timber, hunt the ridges, hunt the points and the fingers. The majority of the deer are going to be in that timber and coinciding with the rut. Perfect timing to maybe catch that bruiser buck that you've been looking for on a doe, moving back and forth between what the farmers are doing and what you're doing. So that's one of the biggest things is to key in on the timber and get out there while they're harvesting the corn. Another key factor is to look at your food plots. Your food plots are going to light up like a Christmas tree. Once the farmer gets the ag ground off or their crops off the fields, those deer are going to really key on those food plots.
If you'd like to learn more and to see the properties that Jason currently has listed for sale, visit whitetailproperties.com/Ziegler. That's Ziegler.
Now there's one exception to that rule, though, I think, which is when you are doing what you just mentioned there, which is calling to them. So you do want them to know you're there, but you just want them to think that you're something different, right?
If you're trying to kill him and you've got him there, no doubt.
Exactly.
I'm talking about don't let him know you're there while you're scouting.
Yeah.
Let me put that in there. That's what I mean. While you're trying to get your stand in place and while you're trying to figure out how to hunt him, don't let him know you're looking for him. Don't let him hear you or smell you.
Yeah. Now let's fast forward though to that hunting situation though. As you mentioned, you were able to call this buck in. Let's talk about calling a little bit. Obviously, you are one of the foremost experts on this topic, given the fact that you kind of invented the category in a lot of ways. Could you kind of walk us through? Could you walk us through the different calls that you like to use? And then what the proper scenario would be to use those and other considerations that might be on your mind when going through that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. Well, number one, I didn't invent it all. There's so many great hunters who have believed in calls and have added to it. Down south, we used to hunt only with dogs, and you let dogs loose and run them across the swamp. They didn't have a lot of deer. But then as we got more deer and people wanted to still hunt them and wanted to see deer being deer, that's when calling really became an advantage. Number one, the problem for most hunters is even people that hunt a lot, they haven't heard all these sounds. I did a lot of my research and my designs and sounds that I was trying to make by being around pinned deer or around pet deer, listening to them, listening to their wheezes and listening to what they did. I had a friend out of South Mississippi that had a beautiful buck in about a 20-acre enclosure that they raised as a fawn. And they didn't want to let it get away, so they put it in that little enclosure. And that deer, during the rut, he would see you as competition. You walk up to that fence, and he'd turn it on, and his lips would go back, and his hair would go, and he'd slam that fence trying to get to you.
Jeez.
Even though he loved you when it wasn't the rut, let you pet him and all that kind of stuff. But the can is usually the first sound that I'm producing. Every deer knows what that means. And during the rut, I got a can here in my hand, but that sound is the sound of a doe that is in stress, in estrus. She's calling for the attention of a buck, or she's almost like she's crying. That they're under tremendous stress at that time. when they're ready for a buck to breed them. And if they're not with a buck, they want a buck to know that. Now that's speculation on my part, because I don't think they think like humans, but they're going through what God has built into them, the instinctive things that they be able to do to be able to procreate and to get the species, a new generation of the species going. So the doe will do that. And then if there's a buck nearby, and he sees another buck anywhere close by, he's going to grunt at him. He's going to let him know, stay away. And that grunt can be simple, just stay away. And if that other buck makes an approach to that buck and doe, then he's going to roar at him. And a roar is a sound that one buck makes to another buck that he is fixing to fight. He's telling him stay away, and that is a very, very aggressive, loud, extended grunt. It's a roar, and if that buck continues to make advances, the last thing he's going to do before he lowers his head and slams into him is a wheeze. Now, I did that on our buck roar, which is my favorite call that we make. The rut roar is good as well, but the buck roar is my favorite. Now, the wheeze is the last deal, and what you need to know about those sounds is that the bleat is the lowest. It carries the least. It's a low sound. It's only so loud. It only carries so far. Then the roar carries the furthest, and the wheeze carries further than the bleat, and the wheeze carries the furthest because it's a high-pitched sound and it travels through the wavelengths will travel further. So if you see a buck, and let's say he's 150 yards away, you got a little wind going on, and you can tell he's dogging. He's trying to pick up the scent of a doe. He's putting his head down, picking it up. Put his head down, picking it up. He's kind of sniffing the ground, picking his nose up, sniffing. He's trying to get the scent of a doe, and you bleat at him, and you go. If he hears you, he's going to stop and look, and you'll know it. Next sound you want to do is, and he's liable to start marching your way. If he doesn't, then and he doesn't turn to you. He heard you, but he starts walking away. Wheeze at him. That's the challenge, and what you're saying by making all those sounds to that buck is, hey, there's a hot doe over here, and there's a buck over here, and he's telling you to stay away, or he's telling another buck to stay away that might be even closer, and that buck will come in to see if he can get in on the action. But let's just say you're in a stand and you haven't seen anything. You're hunting near a cutover. The deer have been coming out of that cutover. It's 30 minutes before dark. You hadn't seen anything yet. Turn the can over twice. Wait a minute. Grunt. Wait a minute. Wait 30 seconds. Roar. And then 30 seconds later, 10 seconds later, and he's going to stand up. A good chance he's going to stand up. I would say for me, it probably works. I pick when I'm going to do it, but I'm going to say it probably works for me 15% of the time. That's pretty high percentage rates when you ain't seeing nothing.
Yeah.
And he comes in looking. Now, you want to have the wind in your favor. A lot of times when he gets 30, 40, 50 yards, he'll start circling downwind. Now, hopefully, he's going to come within bow range of you, and you're going to be able to make that shot. But that's just a couple of the calling scenarios, and it's very typical of what I did when I killed Eric. By the way, Eric scored 182. Didn't tell you that.
Jeez.
That's gross. That's gross score by official score. And his mass is just, oh gosh, the pictures of him are just, he took an incredible picture just because he just got such mass.
I can't imagine.
He's pretty. You have to look him up. He's a pretty buck.
I will for sure. Now, what about regionality? Does the aggressive types of calls that we're talking about here, doing a lot of these snort wheezes or buck roars, is that going to be just as effective in Louisiana or Arkansas as it is in Iowa or Kansas, or do we need to kind of temper things based on your location or hunting pressure or other things like that?
I don't, if everybody in the woods is doing it, you're going to have hunting pressure, and it's going to be that's not good. But it's usually not the case with the whitetail. But I would not regionalize it as much as I would say the better areas that have mature bucks and or a managed herd, so there's more bucks. There's not too many does. In other words, you've got a 3-to-1 ratio is great. 3 does to 1 buck. 2 to 1s can be even better. But anytime you've got age classes of your 7.5 to 6.5-year-old, 5.5, 4.5-year-olds, you got your 3.5-year-olds, your 2.5-year-olds, and you got your does. Anytime you've got all age classes, calling can work great because there's competitiveness. So if you've got a situation in your state, in your area, in your hunting club, in your public land area where it's a competitive for the animals, your calling is going to be more effective.
That makes sense. Now, where does rattling fit into your calling tactics? Does that fit into this whole sequence you mentioned, or
yes? If I've done everything, rattling carries pretty good, and if I've done everything, like calling, I haven't seen anything, and I've waited, 25, 30 minutes, I'll try to rattle. And if I see a deer way off, I can try to rattle. And I've had some great success rattling. I'm going to say I've been successful rattling 5 to almost 10% of the time that I've tried it. Not always a big buck, but I don't rattle long. That's my style. You can, but one of the things that's so hard to duplicate in a rattling situation, if you've ever seen bucks fight, a lot of times people see them fight in fields, edge of fields, and stuff like that. But if they're fighting in the woods, if you're in the woods and you're fighting, you're going to hear pushing, shoving, and a lot of quiet. You're not going to hear the horns all the time because they lock up, and then it's a pushing match. So you're hearing dirt moving, ground moving, limbs being shaken, limbs breaking, saplings bending over. You're hearing a different sounds other than just horns rattling. So if I rattle and I've got some horns, I will just, and then be quiet for a minute. A lot of times that's all the fight there will be, because one of those deer is going to establish authority and strength pretty quick, and then he's going to turn and get the heck out of there because he doesn't want to get his butt slammed anymore. And other deer in the area become curious, and then so wait, 5 to 10 minutes and wheeze. Wait 5 to 10 minutes and or grunt or roar. Anytime you've got the wind in your favor, especially if you're on the edge of a field, perfect scenario is if you've got a bench and you've got a low field along a river bottom, you got a bench and deer are walking the bench, and they've got to come by you to get to that field, and you do this calling sequence, there's a good chance you'll entice a deer to come see what all is going on.
Yeah, it's a scenario that I feel like plays out many, many times each fall, and it's kind of that thing you dream of too, where you imagine sitting there and it's been a slow day and you're like, you know what, I'm going to try some calls, and then you see that set of antlers come pushing out of the grass ahead of you just after you snort wheezed or something. I mean, that's it right there. You
get me going now.
I just actually grunted. I told you before we were recording, but I actually grunted in a nice buck this morning, actually, that kind of deal. Gave him a couple kind of contact grunts. I didn't get to the point where I had to roar or anything. But
did you see him first?
Yes, in this case, I did see him first.
Good.
And the way I kind of go about things, if I see him first, I start kind of at the bottom, like you said, and then we'll work my way up if I need to. But all I needed was that contact grunt. Now, how about timing? For me, at least, with a lot of these types of calls, I'm not really active with my calls or rattling or anything until that pre-rut or rut time frame. Is that the same thing you're doing, or do you get aggressive like this? Okay.
No doubt. I mean, it's almost like the deer speak English, and if you're doing all this aggressive calling, before the pre-rut starts, you're speaking Spanish, and they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's totally changes everything. But now, when you talk about timing, that makes my mind go to something. Years in early 70s, I made my first bow vest. And what I wanted something that when I pulled my bow back, my string would have nothing in the way. My coat wouldn't be bulged out for hunting in cold weather. I wanted it to pull my stuff in and kind of make sure my string wasn't going to catch a zipper or button on my coat or whatever. I wanted to also later on, as I got these calls more developed and whatever, I wanted to be able to access my can call without looking for it. And I wanted to, because timing's everything. You see a buck coming through. He's 80 yards away walking through the woods, and he's fixing to walk by a big oak. And you want to be able to call to him when his head passes behind that oak. You don't want him to be able to stop and turn and look exactly where you're calling from. You don't want to give away your exact location, because he's going to pinpoint it anyway, but you don't want him to be able to see where it is.
Yeah.
So I've got this gusseted pocket on my right side. I'm right-handed, so I'm pushing my bow with my left hand. And I can reach in and grab my can, never look for it. Pocket's open, turn it over, and put it up without ever looking for it or looking for the pocket. And it's got a place to tuck the grunt call in the front if you want to wear it on a lanyard. I wear mine on my right wrist so that I can lift my arm, which is already going to be close to my string anyway. And it's also got a loop that I put the cam of the bow in to hold the bow up. So if I got to wait for this deer to approach, or he's feeding on acorns coming my way and I got to watch him for a long time for, 10 minutes, I don't want all that weight on my bow arm and tire my arm out. So I have that little pouch there, that little loop there that holds my bow up at the right height, but it doesn't tire my arm. So I'm real big on every stinking detail you could think of. The inside of the vest, I have places to store releases, arm guard. I don't need an arm guard, but when you put on a lot of winter clothes, even though you shoot a bent arm and you shoot a quarter handle, you're pushing that bow correctly, you got great form, your clothes can get in the way of that string, depending on your brace height. The shorter the brace height, the closer it's going to come to your arm. And I wear an arm guard, so I keep that right there. I got a mask. I don't always wear a mask, but there's sometimes when I don't have a lot of cover and I'm in a tree, I just don't want my face shining. And so this bow vest, if I get my bow vest and put it on, I ain't forgetting nothing, and it's all there. So it's a pretty cool deal, because I swear by the details, and it's when that little micro opportunity comes your way. If you don't take advantage of it, you're liable not to get another chance.
Yeah, I 150% agree, and there's so many variables outside of our control as deer hunters, right? I mean, there's so many things outside of our control. I just so firmly believe that we have to control all those variables that we do have some type of say over, and it's those little tiny details. So back to timing. Sorry,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, back to timing. I was going to kind of shift gears a little bit. You mentioned how important timing was in regards to, calling at the right moment, when the buck's not looking your way or something, or the time of year, making sure it's in the pre-rut or rut, so we're talking English, not Spanish. What about just the rut in general? And I kind of want to shift away from calling, move over to talking about the rut. And first, I guess, how do people in the South experience the rut differently than we do here up where I'm at? I've heard a lot of different things about kind of wonky timing and all sorts of stuff like that. How is the rut different down there?
Well, when I've hunted the Midwest, there were days when I was so excited to be there, and I would not see a deer. And then I'd go back to our little house we rented there in Iowa, and there's a big old buck laid down at the fence in the backyard with a doe about 8 yards from her laying there. Well, no wonder I wasn't seeing nothing. I mean, they were locked up, and she was close to being bred, and he wasn't leaving her. And if she moved, he moved. But if she moved, he's going to put her back down, because he don't want her moving. Because when she moves, the dadgum other bucks find her. Then he's got to fight. Then he's got to deal with that. So it's all about those big bucks, finding those does and keeping them down. When you don't have when you got a good balanced herd, at some point, just about every buck's got a doe, hot, bedded down. So in the South, it's a lot of the same. It's all about doe movement. So the rut to me is figuring out where they want to be, and hopefully them not going into lockdown. Now we've hunted eastern Colorado near Cheyenne Wells, which is hundreds of thousands of acres of grain and CRP fields. And how much fun is that? Because you ride around in a vehicle with spotting scopes and you're finding deer walking and bedding down first light from a mile away, half a mile away, and you're able to watch a buck bed up with a doe, and then you're able to get the wind on them and make a stalk that may take 2 or 3 hours. And God, you talk about adrenaline field, but during that strength of the rut, when they're all locked down, you can find them there. The problem is no different where y'all hunt in the Midwest and where we hunt here. Once they get locked down, it's all about the doe. She's got to move, or he's got to let her move to be able to do anything. Because you can't hunt a buck where he is. You got to hunt him where he's going to be.
Mm-hmm. What about the timing of the rut? There's so many different little pockets of unique timing for the rut in various locations across the South. Have you ever found a good explanation for why that is, or how to keep tabs on all of that down there?
Well, when you've got a balanced herd, and let's see if you've got a 3 doe to 1 buck ratio or less, you got a balanced herd, and you have a mature class ages of bucks from 6.5, 7.5 on down. You've got the classes of bucks. You got this balanced herd. The rut in Mississippi, in the Mississippi Delta, central Mississippi north, is going to start. The pre-rut is going to start just right at the day after Thanksgiving, a couple of days after Thanksgiving, every year. And then as you get on into the into December, by December, the 10th, it's liable to be full bore. I've hunted in those areas not balanced, and they don't even seem to rut because there's too many does. I don't know. They've got studies. Mississippi State has done an incredible job of studying whitetails and understanding their behavior and understand their mating times and so forth. So the rut's going on. It's just not evident to us because the herd's not balanced, and they don't have to work hard to go find a doe. They don't have to move very much. But typically, it has to, in my mind and what I've learned, it has to do with how balanced the herd is when you're going to have the rut. And if it's a balanced deal, it's going to start shortly after Thanksgiving for the pre-rut.
Interesting. All right, now
as a matter of fact, that Eric deer I was talking about, I want to say I killed him the day after Thanksgiving. I got the day or a couple of days after Thanksgiving, somewhere right in there, and it was pre-rut. You can tell he was pre-rutting. He was on the prowl, and he was responding to calls.
Interesting.
And that's in the heart of Mississippi.
So okay, the rut. Well, right now, as this podcast is first being launched, it will be at kind of the beginning of what a lot of people are going to say is the peak of rutting activity across a lot of the country, especially in the Midwest, the northern 2/3 of the country. These first couple weeks of November for a lot of people is that great rut time period. So for those people right now who are getting into the real heart of it already, and then for those who maybe in December have that to look forward to down south, what are your kind of keys to success during the rut? What are like the handful of things that you tell someone if they want to be able to kill a mature buck in the rut, do this?
Well, don't get in the habit of hunting early, only first thing in the morning and first thing in the afternoon. Just an afternoon hunt and a morning hunt and skip in the middle of the day, because they can be moving at any time. And a lot of times we don't realize we're hunting you're trying to hunt some food sources where the does may be coming through and the bucks are looking for does. So let's say you're hunting an acorn flat. You've got 10 or 12 great white oaks, and they're in a certain spot. And you go in there, when you sneak in there in the dark, you're getting in there early before you're going to get set up before the sun even thinks about coming up. And you're getting to your stand, and all of a sudden you hear deer running. You may hear them, they may blow at you, and once they hear you, if you do it, you under that stand correctly, you're going to have the wind in your face. So a trick there is to blow back at them. Just blow back at them. What they heard was a deer. It wasn't a human. Or if it might be moonlit and they might can see you. But what you're doing is you're running the deer off of this spot, and you're teaching them that this is where the predators are coming to, the human predators are coming to. So a lot of times let them leave that spot and go in at 10 o'clock. So hunting the rut is all about the does. It's all about the bucks looking for does. Food sources are good because the does are going to eat. They're going to be there. Wherever there does, that's where the bucks are going to be. And you've just got to find those travel areas where they're going back and forth. I love hunting the Midwest because those pinch points were so active and so incredible as deer went from one section to another section and used that pinch point to travel through. Calling, do it, let them know you're there. Watch the wind like you've never watched it before. And I will tell you this, and I get questions all the time, I've been using ozonics since the year it came out. And if you use ozonics correctly and you use ozone correctly, you can protect your downwind side. At my farm, I had 9 ozone units, ozonics units, and nobody was allowed to hunt unless they were taught and used it, because the downwind side, if you think you're hunting them like they're coming, but a lot of times they're behind you, or they may be, 50, 75 yards behind you, never know it. And if you will protect that downwind side always and eliminate your odor, then you have a lot better chance of being successful later on, even if you're not that day. And I will say this, if the wind is blowing in gale forces to 12, 15 miles an hour and it's flatlining and the unit can't keep up. So don't expect it to be able to. In a blind, it's near 100% effective if you use it correctly. But I swear by it. And I've got videos to prove it. It's unbelievable what you can get away with. Matter of fact, the guy that helps my wife in the yard, I gave him a unit, helped him get a unit, and he used it. He's already sent me 2 pictures of 2 bucks he killed downwind from him on food sources this year. So it's a truly, but don't expect it to do everything. And when I hunt with cameraman, we've got 2 units, and because you're trying to cover a wide spectrum of area. And the quick concept of it is you want your scent line going through a curtain of ozone. If you're using the unit and you can smell the ozone, and ozone has a very clean hospital-type smell, then you're using it wrong. And can I tell you how many deer have come in downwind, does and bucks? And I've seen them come in, they stand there, and it's like they smell something, but they slap their tongue on their nose like they're trying to grab a molecule or something and trying to figure it out. I don't know what that is. They go on right about their business. It's not anything they're scared of. Mm-hmm. Ozone is natural. Ozone is created by lightning when it goes through the air and breaks oxygen into O3. Very unstable. That's why it will attach itself to odor molecules and why it's so effective.
Yeah. I've experienced similar things to you when using an ozonics, and it's definitely part of my repertoire now too. That said, what else do you do from a scent control standpoint?
Well, I love to make a fake scrape rub, not with a scent or anything. I'm so freaky about scents. Any scent you add, I don't know where it's coming from or where it was bottled, and there's CWD issues these days and whatever. So I actually am using veterinarian artificial inseminating gloves that go all the way up to my armpits. And then I put latex gloves on top of that, similar to the way you use gutting gloves. And I spray my boots down with, we make what's called Control Freak, which is a silver-based odor eliminator. It eliminates odor, and it does a great job. You can prove it if you got any kids and they play hockey and they got stinking shoes. spray Control Freak in there, and you'll be amazed and the odor will be gone. But it doesn't eliminate the odor your body constantly produces. That's why ozonics is so effective. Your breath, your body is producing odors the whole time. So you can spray Control Freak on you, but that doesn't mean it's going to keep on eliminating the odor your body's producing. So I spray my boots down, tall rubber boots, spray them down real good, wear these long gloves and the latex gloves, and I'll say I'm hunting a small food plot. I got a little small sapling growing out on a little island. I'll go out there and I'll take a saw and I will shave the edge of that tree to make it look like a rub, and then I'll make a scrape. And if a deer comes, he visually sees that. He's going to walk over to it. I mean, I can make one this afternoon, and if a deer comes to that food plot tonight, it's going to have deer prints and paw marks in it, and ain't got any scent in it. So I'm doing that too.
Interesting.
Depending on the situation and where the tree is.
Yeah, I've used somewhat similar tactics like that too. Planting like a fake scrape tree in the middle of a food plot, just some way to control where the traffic is headed.
Yes.
to give yourself a better shot.
I think Mark Drury did a video one time. He showed doing that. It's a great idea. Yeah. I never thought of that. I thought, man, they're going to come to it. They're going to make a licking branch and figure it out, because they think that's what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, they're very much. You always hear the analogy that they kind of are like fish relating to structure. Deer relate to structure as well.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
So Will, I could probably talk to you for 4 hours about all this stuff, but I know that you've got a lot of other things going on. I don't want to do that to you, so I wanted to kind of wrap things up with this topic, and that's the future of deer hunting. I've heard you and I've seen you kind of stand up and speak out about things over the last handful of years at some of these North American deer summits, and in relation to some of the different things happening these days in the hunting community. I guess, how do you feel about the future of deer hunting? What do you see coming up? And then if you had a final message to leave with our audience about that, would love to hear that.
Well, as far as bow hunters go, whitetail bow hunters, gun hunters to some extent, but we are loners. We like privacy. We like going into the woods, being quiet. We're all bird watchers. We're watching wild. We just enjoy being there. We enjoy the fall colors and seeing God's creation in the woods. And it goes against our nature, but I urge people to find somebody that wants to learn about archery, about the romance of the era. Teach him about Saxon Pope and Art Young, about Ishii, about Howard Hill, about Fred Bear, about the history of the bow and arrow, the Indians, and light that fire. And I call it the romance of the arrow, the flight of that arrow. It's just romantic. And then spend time with them to learn proper form, to help them get the right equipment. Don't cut them short. Get them the best equipment that you can, or that they can help buy or afford. I've seen kids that have gotten jobs cutting grass in the summer so they could buy a certain site, and it just is wonderful to see them get so involved in it. John Vaca is a guy that is head over the pro staff for all of Bushnell and Federal and Savage, and he helped promote those lines. And his son, he sent me a picture yesterday of his son who killed his first buck by himself, solo, with a bow. And it's just like passing the torch. And what John did in raising his son, he showed him and taught him and exposed him to this world that we love and cherish. And if you love it and you cherish, then you want to protect it and you want to share it with people. And if we as hunters don't recruit younger, new people, because there's a lot of kids out there that don't have hunting parents and don't have opportunity. And if we don't do it, then they're not going to understand it. And if they don't understand it, they're not going to love it. They're not going to want to protect it. So the future of hunting is really, it's up to us. I was so proud of John Vaca sent me that picture of his son and how that big smile on his face, and I know what that's got to be like for John to suddenly pass the torch, and now his son's going to be going by himself. There's huge safety issues. How to use a harness, a safety harness. How to properly get in the tree with the safety harness attached so that you're not putting yourself into a position to possibly hurt yourself. And some of those accidents can be incredibly tragic. Not only death, but paralyzed for life, and end what you wanted to find anyway. In that, by going and doing that, was the peace and quiet of the outdoors. As far as the different states, they all have different ideas and different rules and regulations. Mississippi doesn't allow baiting. Arkansas does. Louisiana does. Kansas does for some. And people get upset about people baiting. They get upset about people using crossbows. Look, I remember they drugged me into the compound world. They drugged me. I said, there's no way that this thing with wheels on it will ever be as good and effective as my recurve. And boy, was I wrong. But I love a compound. I shoot Matthews, and I just love what Matt McPherson does and his engineering on his bows. I love them. I also love the recurve. And I got my Black Widow sitting right here on the table. And I love the flight of the arrow. But when they get to arguing about people with crossbows, man, if a guy will go out in the woods and be a hunter and be a part of it, I don't care if he uses a rock. I want them to go. I want people to go and experience it and want to be there. I don't want to restrict them. I want them to follow the laws of the state where the state thinks it's right. But I just want people to participate, and I want people to be a part and to understand what it is we love so much. A friend of mine, he decided not to go bow hunting Saturday, and he went squirrel hunting. And I was talking to him and standing there looking at him. His name's John Stevens. And he says, man, it was peaceful. And he's finding deer trails, and he's scouting while he's hunting squirrels. He killed his limit of squirrels and talked about how it was a cold front had come through. It was right at 35 degrees. It just had a blast being in the woods. And that's what it's all about. And that's what we need to share and teach to those that are around us, in front of us, behind us. We need to share it. We need to teach them.
I think that is an incredibly important message. So appreciate you wrapping things up with that. It was kind of perfect way to end this. So Will, if people sorry, good.
You go ahead.
I was just going to say, if people wanted to see your show or follow different things you're doing or check out some of the products that you mentioned, where might they be able to find all these different things?
Well, of course, you can go to Primos, PRIMOS.com, to the website. You can go to Primos's YouTube channel, and you can see all kind of tips and see different hunts. You can see elk hunts and waterfowl hunts and predator hunts and deer hunts, of course, and you can see all of that. And then there's podcasts available that the company does. So there's many avenues to be able to get to us. But the TV show is on the Outdoor Channel, and it's got, I think it's 4 airings a week, and you just have to go to the Outdoor Channel and look at those airings, be sure you got the right time slot for your zone, whether it be Central or Mountain or Eastern or whatever it is, to be able to know exactly when the show's coming on. But we're having fun with the show. We've got a great place to hunt, and we're taking advantage of it.
That's awesome. Well, Will, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Yes, sir, Mark. Thank you. Good luck to all your listeners. Good luck. Y'all be careful, and please be careful climbing those trees.
Yeah, and good luck to you too. We'll hope to see some pictures of some big bucks soon, and looking forward to watching episodes of the show in the future too. Thank you, Will.
10-4. Thanks, Mark.
And that is a wrap. Episode number 181 is in the books. But a couple quick updates before we shut this down completely. As me and Dan were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, our hunts are ramping up. Things are getting exciting. So Want to encourage you to follow along with us on social media. I'm posting a lot of updates there. The Wired to Hunt Facebook page is a great place to get things. Wired to Hunt on Twitter, I'm sharing things there. And most of all, what I'm doing is sharing every day. I'm sharing Instagram stories. So over on Instagram, you can share these little mini videos and photos and things like that. That's the story, the Instagram story feature. And I'm kind of documenting each day of hunting on there pretty thoroughly. So make sure you're checking those out. My handle is @, Wired to Hunt, all one word. That's on Instagram. Sign up for it. Check it out. That way you can follow along with what's going on and be the very first to hear about how things go for Holyfield and everything else going on. And then, of course, you can find Dan's information over there at the Nine Finger Chronicles if you want to follow along with his Iowa hunts or parenting debacles. So I guess other than that, I just want to leave you with a quick thank you to our partners who helped make this whole thing happen. So big thanks to Sitka Gear, Yeti Coolers, Matthews Archery, Maven Optics, the Whitetail Institute of North America, Trophy Ridge, and Huntera Maps. And then finally, thank you. Thank you to all of you spending time with us here today for listening. I know it's a busy time of year, so carving out some time to listen to a podcast, I appreciate it. So good luck out in the woods. Hopefully you're going to have some incredible hunts, some awesome memories. And until next time, have fun, be safe, good luck, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.